Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the second session of the day. And as you can see, Professor Shekhar Verma has joined us. He is a senior faculty and he is professor in Indian Institute of Information Technology, Allahabad. Professor Verma has a diverse research background. I'm delighted to host him over here, and probably this would be the best session you will hear in the workshop, entire workshop. And I'm very much delighted to host sir over here because it is always a learning experience to hear from him. So, Professor Verma has extensively worked in the area of machine learning, wireless sensor networks, even cryptography, and sir has worked in so many domains. So I think we can start the session directly because we have fair number of participants, and as soon as sir is ready to go, sir, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal, for such nice words. Obviously, coming from a student, is welcome. So the talk is divided into two parts. The first part is a little overview and talks about deep learning and IoT. What are the challenges? The second part of the talk goes to wireless networks, wherein I'll be talking more and more about the physical layer and about the MAC layer. And that will be a little more technical than what the first part of the talk will be. But we'll proceed at our leisure and we'll stop whenever the boss gives a signal, okay, this is more than what we can chew on. So without much ado, let me start. And I'll be assuming that you know a lot of IoT, and I think the other speakers before me have given you ample background of both IoT as well as deep learning. I know Dr. Shivram Dubey, again a student of ours, is a wonderful speaker and is known for his lectures on deep learning and machine learning. So I believe, and Dr. Amrit may have given you a lot of insights into the IoT part as well as into data mining and parallel and distributed big data. So I believe you are ready for something which assumes that you have a lot of, you know what is deep learning, you know what is IoT, and I need to talk only about this in thing, that means deep learning in IoT. So let's start. But before we start, let's see what is deep learning. And by far, let's start and see what is machine learning. What do you want to learn actually? So we say that all machine learning is learning a function. And learning a function, how do you learn a function? We learn a function by learning the parameters of the function. How do you learn the parameters of the function? We assume what the functional form of the function will be. That means, for example, we assume that the function is a straight line and we say that y or f is equal to mx plus c. Then I learn m and c from data. But then this function can be nonlinear. So we say that, okay, we can assume a nonlinear function, and for example, the function can be a0 plus a1x plus a2x squared plus a3x cubed, and we learn this function. The output can be continuous. In this case, we'll call it regression. The output can be discrete, then uncountable. Then we say that the whole thing is classification. That means we have finite number of classes. Then we have a classification. If you have infinite number of classes, then we say that we have regression. Then again, we may learn when the output for some of the input is known. We say that this is supervised learning. We do not know what is the output, what is the correct output, then that's unsupervised learning. So supervised learning is like learning from a teacher. Unsupervised learning is learning not from a teacher, but from a friend. The friend tells you that this is right or wrong, but does not tell you how to get that right. So a friend is a critic. So we have a critic learning there. In addition to these two things, we have a third paradigm of learning, which is known as reinforcement learning, in which you learn from your experience and you learn how to plan to get to a goal. And this type of learning is called reinforcement learning. So these are three broad paradigms of learning. But then where does deep learning come into being? I said in machine learning, we learn the parameters of the function, assuming the functional form of the function. That means we assume that if it's a PDF, a probability density function, then we know what is the PDF, it's Gaussian or Laplacian. If it's a function, we assume that it's a straight line or a polynomial function, to what degree of polynomial function is, and then learn the parameters. Suppose I know that the function is highly nonlinear. I do not know the functional form. That means I do not know what type of polynomial it is. Then I want to learn both the function as well as parameters. And how do we learn? We learn, number one, by representing the function by a large network. So we say that we have an input, we have an output, and inside we have a lot of connections of the function, and we do not know what the function is, and we do not know what are the parameters or what are the connections of this function or the circuit. Then what do? What we do is very easy. We give an input, we know the output, and since we have a large amount of input, so we start learning both the function, that means what are the connections which will be active in the network, and also we learn the parameters of the function. So we learn what are the connections, and we also learn the weights of the connections using the large amount of data that we have. And when we can represent a function by a network and learn this, then it is called deep learning. But then how do we learn? So we have a technique which is known as backpropagation, which gives us a promises to give us the smallest network that can represent the function which can explain the data. So I'll repeat, backpropagation is a technique which allows us to learn the minimum size of the network, both in terms of the weights, that means parameters, and the complexity of the function. We do not know what the function is, and this particular function, which has been represented by a network, explains the data. So we learn both the function as well as the parameters of the function of this highly non-linear function from using backpropagation from the data by representing the function as a huge network. So as you can see, follow the mouse, we find that the function is highly nonlinear, it has parameters, and the parameters are the weights of the network. Then what are the paradigms which are available? If it's a spatial data, that means the data is spread over in some very high dimensional space and static, then we can represent this particular data or as a function, huge function called convolutional neural network, learn the function as well as the parameters of the function or weight of the CNN using backpropagation, using some distance measure, which is the error at the output initially in terms of either Euclidean distance or Manhattan distance, or we call it L1 norm, L2 norm, L3 norm, LPQ norm. So we use some measure of distance or error at the output, and depending on the output, we backpropagate and learn the parameters of the function. Now suppose the function to be learned is a time series. It has a temporal dimension as well. And we do not know in what manner the past affects the future. We do not know whether it's the immediate past which is affecting me, or it is 1 year old, or it is 2 years old, or it is 10 years old. What past, what and in what manner my past is going to affect my future. Then for learning this, again, I use the same distance measure or error measure, but now I backpropagate in time. And I use a recurrent network, or a dynamic network like LSTM or any other recurrent neural network. And the same philosophy is used. We represent the error by some error measure like a norm, Euclidean distance, Manhattan distance, or higher distances, or if the data is correlated, say Mahalanobis distance or something of that sort, and learn using backpropagation in time. Then we say that this is not enough, because if you want to learn the PDF itself, now we are not learning the function, we are learning the probability density function which has generated this training data. Then at the output, you don't have a single output, we have a PDF as output. So I must be able to find out what is the distance between two PDFs or probability distribution functions, and that is KL divergence. Then we have autoencoders which allow us to learn this PDF. So I give training data, then variational autoencoders allows me to learn the PDF which has generated this data. This technique generated a lot of interest, but was found that it is not really interesting. It's not really giving good answer. What type of answer? Again, I repeat, I give an input which is an image. I learn the PDF. Now, if I want to generate another image with the same PDF, this particular output started giving some trash output, which was not very useful. So what people said, in fact, this is a breakthrough. What people said that instead of learning the PDF, why not generate samples directly using the same technique? That is, using the distance between the PDF of the input image and the image being generated. So we take a random PDF, that means it has just a Gaussian or a normal distribution with a certain mean and variance. You give that input, give the image and this PDF, the distance between the PDF of the given samples and the Gaussian will be calculated, and then it will be improved. The Gaussian will be improved, the parameters will be improved such that we are able to generate samples using the same PDF. And this is what was known as GAN. And this created a lot of excitement because you could generate samples which were quite like the real sample which we had given. So this gave rise to people generating fake news. You can generate music. You can generate your own video. You can, using an LSTM, you could generate fake news. You could generate a poetry. You could generate a text. Just now we have one software which uses the same technique to autofill forms. Then just before that, there's another network which is known as an autoencoder, which learns the function from the function itself. So it's like saying that you are entering into a room through the door, squeeze yourself, go out of the window, and then stand up once again. So can I find out how you really squeezed yourself at the window? That's dimensionality reduction. So learning function from itself gave rise to a function or a technique which is known as autoencoder. Mind you, this is a deterministic method. However, its probabilistic form came to be known as the variational autoencoder, which we saw in the previous place. As you can see, it allows us to learn the PDF of the input. We give inputs which are images, assuming that they're coming from the same PDF, and we learn the PDF itself. So this is an overview, crude overview of deep learning. The question is, what are the takeaways? And can this particular function approximation be done on IoT? Why do you think of this? Why should deep learning have something to do with IoT? What is IoT then? We say that IoT, we have small sensors, large number of unreliable sensors. So the major thing is that the sensors are cheap unreliable, and there are a lot of unreliable small IoT devices or sensors. They monitor and they sense the environment around themselves and pass on data. Now, here is the key. We are generating a lot of data. Why we are generating a lot of data? Because we want to estimate or infer something about the environment which they are sensing. Number one. And this is a problem of inference, and any inference is just learning. And then when deep learning is there, why not use deep learning for learning or making inference? When you draw inferences, that is deep learning, that is learning. So we would like to use very advanced, a very good form of learning which is available, which is deep learning. And then why it is really required? Because we are generating time series data, we are generating temporal data. I am monitoring a particular environment, say a forest, from morning till evening. So it's temporal data. A lot of data is being generated. Then the data by itself from an individual sensor or an IoT device is unreliable because it's cheap, it's noisy, so it's unreliable. So we have to choose thousands and millions of devices, theoretically speaking, of unreliable data to generate very reliable output or classification or clustering or in-network inference or generating a function or emulating the environment or generating the environment. What is all this? Sounds that we are talking about deep learning. Deep learning does the same thing. It takes a lot of data, and the data itself, individual data, may not be so reliable, but using a large amount of data, CNN is able to classify, it's able to generate a classifier, a function. LSTM is able to work in the spatio-temporal domain. Autoencoders is used to, reduce the dimension. The GAN is able to generate similar samples. So this seems to be a perfectly ready-made application area for deep learning. So the question is, why not deep learning on IoT devices? And what was there prior to the era of deep learning? So what was DL being used on? I'll use DL for deep learning. So DL or deep learning was used to improve all different machine learning algorithms. As soon as we had very high dimensional data, we had the problem of overfitting, we had a large amount of data, then we had deep learning, which started scaling things and were very, very successful because of, number one, we are computational power, and because of large amount of data. Now, in IoT, what we want, we have large amount of data being generated from millions and billions, so-called millions of IoT devices. But the second thing, that of computation, is largely absent. What happens in IoT? IoT says that we have resource constrained devices. And we have the problem of that we need to predict or infer or draw inferences in real time. So the direction changes and the scenario has changed. We want to learn, we have a lot of data, but we don't have the computational power. We don't have memory, we don't have time, and we don't have energy. So what we have is data. What we don't have are resources or time. The resources are computational power, memory, energy, and we don't have time. So what we want is, we want smart objects and we want lightweight intelligence. And we find that deep learning as of now does not have this particular lightweightedness property. So we want, our wish is to use deep learning methods. The problem, we have resource constrained devices. So what do we do? The first thing that we can do, as you can see on the screen and follow my mouse, you can see that we can have a pre-trained network. We are doing this a lot in AlexNet, ImageNet, the different deep learning network is pre-trained. However, can we do this? Yes, we can pre-train a CNN, for example, and then put it on the IoT device. But we see that even for a pre-trained network, the resources, as you follow my mouse, the available resources are not sufficient. So deep learning networks like CNN, LSTM, GAN, autoencoders, variational autoencoders are simply not there for IoT, because IoT devices cannot support these deep learning algorithms. Now, what are the observations? Can we somehow have deep neural networks or CNNs run on IoT devices? The answer is, let's see, there are some observations. Do we really require so many parameters? We find that many parameters that are stored in CNN or deep neural networks are not really required. They are redundant. And we don't need large number of hidden layers also. And number 3, which is not written on the slide, is that we don't need that kind of accuracy also. So the application area says that we don't need that kind of accuracy. We don't want accuracy to be or precision to be of 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places. So why do we want a network for it? So can we prune the network? The question is, can we prune the network so that we are in a position to reduce the complexity by removing the parameters and the layers? Have a pruned network, and this pruned CNN or LSTM will be IoT friendly. So in the next few slides, I'll be talking about how to prune or how to really delete some edges, delete some weights, or delete some layers, reduce hidden layers, so that the CNN or the DNN can work on IoT devices. Let's see what are the different approaches which are there, and what all of them, as you can see, are still in the research arena. The first, CNN or other DL techniques are all dense networks. We want to make them into a sparse network. We try to remove layers, we try to remove the weights, so that it's very, very lightweight, and this lightweight thing can then, or algorithm or network can then learn and run on IoT devices. We find that this will not be a generic network, but will be suited only for specific applications. Let's see what people started doing and what are the research being done in this particular area. So first, what people did was, we started measuring what is the energy usage on different mobile and sensor platforms. So people, what they did was took the Intel Edison, the Snapdragon 800, NVIDIA Tegra, as we all know, works on different kinds of IoT devices as well as powers our mobiles. We found that it can run on compressed models. And we find that the execution time of CNNs, actually initial layers take a lot of time, but as we have done the dimensionality reduction, the later layers consume very less time. And the time also depends on the activation function which is being used. For example, sigmoid is an exponential function, takes a lot of time. Tan H is still better. ReLU, which is actually a straight line, is very fast. So if you want time, then we can use a sigmoid. Instead of a sigmoid, we use a ReLU or we use something else. And what we can do is we can do away with some of the initial layers to really reduce time. What about memory? We say that CNNs, because of convolution, etc., take less storage than a fully connected deep neural network. So what we want is, we want to reduce fully connected layers and have more and more of convolutional layers. So what we can do, we can reduce by reducing the total number of parameters and by pruning the network. The deep neural networks of the CNN can run on IoT devices. So let's see what is the proposal. The proposal is we train the network on a very huge machine. We have our own, say, GPU machines. We learn and train the network on that particular machine using offline data. Then, when the weights are less than a certain threshold, we delete all the weights which are less than a certain threshold. Then, once the pruning is done, we again train. When we have trained again a very small network, then this trained network is put on the IoT devices. Let's see. This is on the left-hand side of your screens. We have the unpruned, fully connected network. This is the input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The output is 2 neurons, or the output layer contains 2 neurons. On the right-hand side, as you can see, the connections are done away with. Some of the neurons are not missing in the final layer. For example, the final layer has 2 neurons. Just before the penultimate layer has just 2 neurons. In the non-compressed, we have 3 neurons. So what is happening is that we are able to prune the network so much that it can now, after learning, it can be put on an IoT device. So let's see. First, we train the network. Then we prune the unimportant weights. Then we prune the neurons which have no input-output. Then we again fine-tune the weights. And this learned network is then used. And we find that we are able to prune AlexNet 9 times or VGGNet 13 times. VGG16 is compressed to 13 times. However, from IoT point of view, the accuracy is hardly affected. What are the limitations? The limitations are that once we have made it learn, it can work only for that particular application only. So it's a pre-trained network which is for a specific task. But we are happy. Why are we happy? Because IoT applications are specific. Once the IoT device is deployed in the field, it does a specific job. It is not for generic job. The second way of doing it is we have better hardware. So people in the hardware area started making application specific ICs known as accelerators for IoT. However, from software point of view, we cannot do anything. We cannot make special hardware. What we can do is we can prune the network only. There's another proposal given by one of the greats in the field, and he proposed that we can compress the neural network with a hashing. So the NN weights are randomly grouped into hash buckets using a hash function. That means when we have weights which are in a certain range, They are just hashed and put into a single parameter. That means now the weights which are within a certain range are pruned and put as the same weight only. And this is what is known as HashNet or hash bucket. And after learning, what we can do is we can fine tune using backpropagation. And this allows us to store the weights very, very easily, because the total number of weights to be stored are very less, because most of the weights are almost same. This proposal, as you can see, allows us, if you read the top line, is random weight sharing with a compression of 1/1/4. That means that the network is reduced 4 times. And as you can see, the same color, all greens are actually put as same weight. All pinks are usually same weight. All this orangish yellow is put as one weight. So we are able to reduce the weights. And this is the HashNet. And we find that this particular HashNet, in which the storage required is very, very low, but the accuracy is sufficiently higher. So what we are doing, we are not only by pruning the layers, by deleting the neurons, by making the weights same, we are actually making the network computation friendly and storage friendly. One more approach, as you can see, is to make the weights 0 or 1 only. So the weights are not some integers or some decimal numbers, they are 0 and 1 only. And this leads to a tremendous decrease in the power consumed, because you have to do only bitwise operations. The total number of storage decreases, the total number of memory decreases, the total amount of computation decreases, because we are able to do binary operations very, very efficiently. And hence, these can be used on IoT devices very, very easily. And this is how is the design of the approximate neural network, which is used by binarizing the weights. I'm not going into details, but if you look at, we start with a fully connected neural network, then learn, and then once we are able to learn, find out what are the weights or what are the neurons which are sensitive, what we are not sensitive, delete those, make the weights binary as you go right, and then do backpropagation. So without going into details, we find that yes, we can binarize the weights, we can or make the weights linear or integer and store these weights very, very easily without large amount of memory. Since we have only bitwise operations, we can really reduce the storage, the computation, and the energy required for computation. So this approximate computing, we said that, okay, we don't want very highly precise answer. We want just some indication whether the event has happened or has not happened, or what is approximate amount of fire, what is approximate heat which is there, or some intruder has entered my compound or not. And hence I don't want very precise answers. We just want detection to be there, and hence approximate neural network can be used by pruning or doing approximate computing. And this allows me to run the CNN or the DNN on the IoT device itself. As you can see, we can reduce the precision. So instead of using fixed number of bits, which is 16 bits or 32-bit precision, I can just reduce and make it 4 to 10 bits. And this approximate deep learning is really useful and can be utilized on resource constrained devices. Then what people said, okay, let's use some specific hardware or circuits. This is fine. If you have your own VLSI, which is dedicated VLSI on IoT devices, then probably you can run some specific DL algorithm, or you can have some image VGG16 or VGG, some higher version of VGG running on your IoT. But the IoT is then a very specific high cost device. Then people, what they have started doing is, they have started making very small processors known as micro modes. And these micro modes can also be used for running deep learning algorithms on IoT devices. As you can see, they're very small, 1 cubic millimeter sized, very small, tiny processors, use only 300 microwatts and can do deep learning. So what is the challenge? As you can see, there are a lot of research being done for approximate computing, for designing accelerators, for pruning the network, for designing networks which can learn offline and then I can deploy it on the IoT devices, how to have same weight sharing so that we can have total amount of storage requirement reduced. So you're right that there is a lot of research needed in this particular area of making DL algorithms or DL or deep learning algorithms for fitting it into the IoT devices. So what is the challenge? The main challenge is real-time analytics. So it is not clear whether network compression can be used, but yes, I can use it if I do it some offline learning, and then it keeps on learning on the IoT also. It keeps on adapting, and hence this is what is known as meta learning, and meta learning can be used in deep learning to adapt the learned network on IoT devices. And we know that meta learning learns from very small amount of data, and this can be used, and this is one research area because meta learning has not been used in IoT field. Then the compression methods have not been used and not been proposed for RNN or LSTM. So there is a gap here, and all budding researchers can apply the existing compression techniques of pruning the network into LSTM or RNN or GRU architectures. And obviously, you have to say, you want only detection of fire, or you want to find out what is the temperature of the fire? Do you want to know that somebody has entered my compound, or you want to detect something, or you want to have complete details? Do you want to find out something has happened, or you want to know details of what has happened? If you are in the former, you want just detect, then I can have low precision, small deep learning techniques or deep learning algorithms or networks, and we can do a lot of inference or network inference on IoT devices. So approximate computing approaches can be used, and they can be energy efficient, and they can operate on resource constrained devices. And similar to network compression techniques, these methods take the advantage of insignificant neurons. We can reduce the precision of the inputs, and hence what we can do is use these techniques for specific applications in IoT. Let's have an overview. As you can see, the network compression technique, the advantage is reduced storage and computation. The disadvantage is not good, it's only for a specific task. And pruning is done offline, but online pruning cannot be done because it's really overloads training. Why? Because you have to first train it, then prune the weights, retrain it, prune the weights, retrain it, prune the weights. And if the accuracy is really falling down, then get back and add weights. So it's really, really cumbersome training. Now, instead of making the network approximate, we say that, okay, the output is approximate. So this makes the DL models fast, saves energy. We are saying, okay, we don't want accurate answers. The answer itself we want is approximate. In the network compression, we are learning an approximate algorithm. In this approximate computing, we are learning an approximate answer. Kareeb, Kareeb, this is the answer. So this is not suitable for precise system. The hardware approaches are using accelerators or using tiny modes, which are application specific, small, very powerful IoT devices. But these are only when and require redeployment and require programming is very difficult because these are application specific ICs and they require, they may not be, you will not be able to program them using generic programming languages. So what are the challenges? The challenges, first, another challenge. We have a lot of data coming out from IoT devices, but we have not recorded that data. So for researchers, we need a lot of data sets. So I thought I'll show you some data sets which are available for testing your DL models. So here are some, when I share my PPT and give it to Dr. Vishal, probably you'll be able to get these addresses. So as you can see, there are large number of data sets which are available, and these can be used for training and designing deep learning networks. As you can see, the data is there, the data is temporal data is there, static data is there, and hence we can have LSTM type of models, we can have CNN type of models, and you can use them and prune the networks, do approximate computing, and propose new techniques by using these data sets. So there are 2 pages on which these data sets are given. Then what we can do, what is the challenge? Instead of, we know that in deep learning, we give the image, we give raw data. But then what we can do is, we can do some pre-processing. This pre-processing can be done on your computers while you are doing research. On real IoT, it will be done on the IoT device itself. Prior to making inference, we can pre-process. That is, we can have from different sources, we can put the data in the same format. We can somehow find out whether the data is coming from, we can normalize the data. We can find out whether there is some missing data or not, we have noisy data or not. So if you have noisy data, we have missing data, we have data in different formats, then we can pre-process and normalize the data before doing the deep learning part. Then we have a problem. We are sensing a lot of data. If you have a smart home or we have healthcare data, then everybody wants that data. You know that Facebook or Google is ready to give Jio a lot of money to the tune of 33,000 crores just for data. So data is important. But when data can be used for malicious attacks. So before we give data for inference into the deep learning model, I should somehow avoid my privacy leak. So how to anonymize data, how to learn from, do private learning using deep learning algorithm, how can we preserve anonymity, or how can we do privacy preserving deep learning is very, very important and can be is a very, very strong and thriving field of research. People are coming with techniques so that even if I am sharing my data, even if I'm sharing my network, my learned network, then also the privacy is preserved. This is known as federated learning, in which I have my own IoT, I generate some data. Somebody else has some data from IoT. Without giving the data, we are able to learn, collaborate and learn. This is what is known as federated data learning in IoT, which is an active field of research. And obviously, these deep learning models can be made to learn privately. They can also be made to learn abnormal or invalid data and hence can be used for security also. As you can see from the reference in the footnote, this is actually a very, very thriving field of research. And what are the future directions? The future directions in this is, number one, we now have mobile data. People are moving, and on our mobile, everybody is mobile. We have 11, 12 sensors, rather from GPS to accelerometers to motion sensors to camera to video to audio to so many things. So there are so many sensors here. So we have a lot of mobile big data, especially when the city is smart. And people have shown that we can use a very, very lightweight iterative map reduce technique with several parallel Spark workers, and these can run on mobile devices for inference. So we can have time series mobile data, and we can really do research and use diluted map reduce. And Dr. Amrit may have already told you about this. And we can use parallel Spark workers to do inference or classification or learning using these mobile big data. And we can do this on IoT devices themselves. Now, we say that people are moving on the road. If they're moving on, large number of people are moving on the road and we sense it. If it's afternoon, fine. If it is unlocked time, fine. But it's a lockdown time in COVID, then this is not good. If there are a lot of noise coming in the night, it's not good. If a lot of noise is coming in the day, it's fine. So context is important. If my children are at home, then there is a lot of noise, fine. If the children is not there and there's a lot of noise from my home, it's not good. So context needs to be integrated with IoT. Again, if you look at the footnote and the reference, we find that a lot of work has already been done in the area, and we need to somehow use context information along with IoT data for inference or for prediction. And how do you incorporate this contextual information is an active area of research, still needs a lot of research. Then we have semi-supervised learning, wherein we have a very few labeled data. Once we have trained the network, we have very few labeled data. But what we are getting is a lot of unlabeled data, constantly getting a lot of unlabeled data from the IoT devices. Can we improve our classification, regression, or learning using these unlabeled data? The answer is yes. And in IoT framework, we need to develop more and more of semi-supervised analytic framework for learning from very small amount of labeled data and very large amount of unlabeled data for very highly accurate learning. And this is really required, and a lot of work is being done in this particular area in IoT research. Then we were saying that we are going to use deep learning in IoT. But why only use deep learning in IoT? Why do you not benefit from both IoT and DL? So we can use both of them together in virtual reality for object tracking, for activity recognition, for image classification, and we can improve our education, museums, small connected cars, so on and so forth, by marrying both the IoT and the deep learning capabilities. So friends, this finishes off my first part of my lecture. And if you are still with me, I would like to start the second part of my lecture. And Dr. Vishal, are you with me? Dr.
Yes,
Vishal?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I can hear you.
So is it the second part too clear? We can look at it?
Yes, sir. The screen is clear, sir.
So, okay, it's now part 2. I'm going to use, and in this particular, so are there any questions in the part 1 type, or we can take the questions later on?
Yes, sir. Let us hold the questions for the end of the session.
Okay. So in the second part of the lecture, I'll be talking about more of physical layer of wireless networks and how deep learning is used there. And this will be a little more technical lecture. I'll be talking about the different kinds of deep learning networks and deep learning algorithms which are being used to improve the physical layer performance, to design wireless networks, especially the physical layer and the MAC layer. So off we go and see what is the challenge and how deep learning is really meeting the challenge of wireless environment and wireless system design. So first thing, if you look at your 4G devices, very complex. If you look at 5G devices, still very complex. The transmission is over wireless, that means over air or vacuum. So we don't have any control over the channel. The channel is a place over which the signals travel. The channel characteristics cannot be controlled. The devices we can control, but the devices most of the time are small. Large number of devices are communicating over a shared wireless channel. So I repeat, the channel is the problem. The channel has noise, the channel has interference, the channel is being shared, and hence it also attenuates the signal. When we speak, the signal really falls down as we go to longer distances. All these challenges of interference, of noise, of channel attenuation need to be addressed. And how do we address it? We say, okay, we are going to use network control targets, and don't be afraid of this. We need to do resource allocation. We find to allocate the amount of memory, the amount of energy, the amount of computational resources for sending and receiving signals. And when there are a lot of signals coming, they are in a queue. We must do queue management, or we must be in a position to do congestion control when the large number of users are there on the shared wireless channel. Having said this, let me simplify things. Very easy. There are transmitters, there are receivers. Transmitters transmit signals using antennas and transmitters. The receivers receive signals using receiving antennas, and there are multiple antennas at both the transmitter and the receiver. There are multiple transmitters and there are large number of receivers. For example, one television transmission, hundreds of television sets, thousands of television sets are there across the world. And it is possible that if I am talking, multiple people are listening. So I am the transmitter, multiple people are listening to me. So what is happening is that the channel is a wireless channel. So now everybody who is transmitting is received by someone or the other. So there are multiple transmitters, multiple receivers, everybody is transmitting, everybody is receiving over the wireless channel. The wireless channel itself attenuates the signal, adds noise, and there is an interference. So you can see the extent of challenge. So what we have high computing capacity. We now have even mobile devices or receivers which have very high computing capacity. We can learn. We have been gathering this particular sent data, received data, channel characteristics, and we are logging them. So we have large data sets. We have very intelligent algorithms. So we have everything We can change the input, we cannot change the output. So we can change the structure of the input. Obviously, we do not change what is being transmitted, the meaning we are not changing, but the structure we can change. So when we use deep learning or AI, we can learn the environment, or we learn from the perceived environment. And once we learn, then we can learn from the data that we have collected, the massive amount of data that we have collected. And then instead of using some mathematical model, as I told you initially, the input-output function, that means the wireless channel characteristics, can be learned or modeled by a machine learning or a deep learning model. Usually, since the function is not known, the functional form is not known, a deep learning technique will be the best technique to learn both the functional function and its parameters. And we say that we have a lot of data. As you can see, we have this very active area of research, and papers have just started coming out in 2019 in this particular area. So what to learn? What are the network performance parameters? What is what we desire? So that is signal to noise ratio. What is the collision rate? What is the delay? What is the loss? What is the error? All these things we are learning. Again, as you can see, we have a reference of a survey from 2019, pretty recent research. So in deep learning, what do you want to learn? We analyze the patterns, learn the network performance parameters, and then improve the design of the wireless network. So we have massive data sets in which we store the performance, the characteristics of the wireless channel, characteristics of the receiver antennas, the characteristics of the transmitters, and then learn this particular complex mapping from input to output. And if you can learn it, then you know what is the error which has coming into the system because of these inferences. So we can modify the input and modify the output, because we cannot control the channel. The wireless channel is God given, it's not controlled. So we can change the input, we can change the output, and hence so that there is minimal loss of signal when we are transmitting. So I'll just jump. So what is the design? We have a source. For example, what I'm speaking, speech is the source, or video is the source. Then we encode the source. We change them into electromagnetic waves. We do some source coding. We compress it. We have it in JPEG format. For example, you have an image, and then do some encoding based on the channel, so that we do some forward error correction code, or do some line coding like Manchester coding or something. Then we do some modulation, some amplitude modulation, or some frequency modulation, or some digital modulation, and then we transmit. The channel is not in our control, and then we do the inverse to get at the destination. We want the destination to be the same as the source. I repeat, we want the destination signal to be the same as the source. Why don't you see that when source and destination are same, only the channel has characteristic which is unknown, and we can collect data, then we can model the whole thing as a deep network. In fact, if the input and the output are same, then as Dr. Shivam Dubey may have told you, that this is actually an autoencoder. So why can't we use an autoencoder to model a communication system? This is the idea. Can we do it? The answer is yes. We have the input, the output has to be same as the input. So, but in actual system, we receive a very, very noisy output, So what should be done to the input so that the output is what we desire is what is the autoencoder design. Mind you, only the channel is unknown, but we can learn the characteristics of the channel. Now, in existing designs, we use mathematical models of the channel. But mathematical models can be very complex, and we may not be able to learn this complex mapping or function. But can we learn using data? Yes, deep learning allows you to learn any function from data. So we use deep learning. In fact, we use autoencoders to learn the complex function mapping of the channel. So what we are saying is that can we use deep learning for end-to-end communications? The answer is yes. And I told you the input, as you can see in the figure, is S. The output should also be the same as input S. So if the input and the output are same, then we can say that we can learn this middle one, which is the noisy layer, which is the channel, such that we give an input, we change the input so that we get S as the output. And we have learned the channel, so this can be an autoencoder. And this learning can be done in real time. So we can learn in real time, and by learning this, first we learn from the large amount of data that we are there. So we have designed an autoencoder, and this autoencoder can learn the channel, can learn all types of changes being made by the channel. Suppose I give input as 1, output is coming as 2, but we want output as 1. So what changes should I do to 2 so that if I give input as something 1 dash so that I get output as 1. I again repeat, I want the output to be the same as input. Whatever signal I have sent, जो भी signal भेजा है, वही signal चाहिए. But there is a change where instead of 1, I am getting 2. So I change this 1, tweak it so that I send 1 prime or I send some other signal, but I get 1 as output. And this is what is learning of the autoencoder. I'll just show you, this is how we are learning. The input is S, the output is S dash. Channel we cannot control, but we can model the whole thing as an autoencoder, because in autoencoder input is same, the output is same, and hence we modify this left hand S such that the output becomes, or the S cap as you can see, becomes equal to S. So this inverse mapping can be learned as a function, and this function can be learned from data, and we can keep on learning when the active data transmission is being done. So this particular model of autoencoder, which models the channel, as you can see, we have the encoder, which is nothing but a deep CNN with a ReLU activation function, and the channel can be modeled again by data, and the decoder is again a ReLU plus a softmax. Why do we use a softmax? Because we can, number one, we want to learn, as you know, the channel is noisy, it's random. So we don't want a point answer. What we want is a probability density function. And a softmax allows you to change an input of point inputs to a categorical distribution. So a category distribution can be used and generated using the softmax technique. So this is, we give an input, the CNN learns and gives an output. The mapping is learned such that the output becomes same as the input. And what we want to learn, we want to learn a representation such that the output becomes same as input. Now, look at this animation. This is, I do not know, most of you from computer science background may not remember this, but this is quadrature amplitude modulation. these 4 red squares on the left hand side should be in 4 quadrants. अगर हम XY coordinate लेते हैं तो एक रहेगा फर्स्ट quadrant में, एक रहेगा सेकंड quadrant में, एक थर्ड, एक फोर्थ में, equidistant. But when we send that, then we find that they at the output, because of the noise, because of the channel characteristics, they are actually jumping on each other. So what should be the separation in the input so that the output error is reduced? So as you can see, initially there is a loss which is large. As the number of epochs are increasing, as the number of epochs increase, and as you can see them, they're increasing. We now have 200 epochs. The error is really going down. And as you can see on the left hand side, the mouse, if you see my mouse, the input constellation is not equidistant. It is some function, it is changed, it's learned because of data. So as we have more and more epochs, we find that the input constellation needs to be changed. And if this is the input which is changed, then the output is really reducing. So as you can see on your screens from this animation, we are able to learn the autoencoder. In autoencoder, the input and output are same. So we learn a mapping such that the output is very close to input, the original input, if this is the constellation. So this is what is a channel autoencoder, and has been used in, it's being used in deep space missions. And we are using an autoencoder, which is nothing but a deep learning algorithm, to actually learn what should be the input so that the output is error free. And as you can see, we have a deep learning based design which learns from massive amount of data which has already been collected. It learns, and then after it has learned, it keeps on learning and keeps on evolving in real time. So as you can see, the left image shows the transmitted constellation. The middle shows the received constellation. When we send this, we get this overlaps. As soon as we are able to learn these constellations in the middle picture, they separate, and hence the loss goes down. And this is the technique. There are 4 number of data points. So it's called quadrature phase shift keying, or QAM4. Now, remember, we come to another design which is being used in our own mobiles for modulation, which is known as orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. Very interesting. And for computer science people and for machine learning people, this is very interesting because it uses a technique. We say that if the vectors which we are sending, so we are sending signals, suppose these signals are actually the eigenvectors. Machine learning people will be able to understand that eigenvectors are all at 90 degrees to each other. So if you send things which are 90 degrees to each other, then they will not interfere. So I am sending 4 signals or 10 signals or 20 signals which are all 90 degrees to each other in a very high dimensional space. And if you send these in the frequency domain, then this is known as orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. So this is a philosophy, or this is a technique which is used in communication, and we send eigenvectors as signals. So when we are sending eigenvectors or signals which are 90 degrees to each other in the frequency domain, not in the time domain, and the messages are made to ride on these eigenvectors. So this little involved. So you imagine that there are vectors which are 90 degrees to each other, and the messages are being modulated by these eigenvectors, and we send them. And we do this in the frequency domain. So this is what is known as orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. But how do we get eigenvectors in the frequency domain? Very easy. We take a signal find out its Fourier transform or do Fourier series. All Fourier coefficients are at 90 degrees to each other. So lo and behold, what we are going to do is, we are going to do, as you can see, we have taken a discrete Fourier transform, and the discrete Fourier transform coefficients are eigenvectors, and these are being used to transmit orthogonal signals. And then at the receiver end, we use inverse DFT or discrete Fourier transform to convert the signal from frequency domain back to time domain. Very easy. So we take the carrier or the main carrier signal, do the DFT, find out the orthogonal frequency coefficients. The images are sent, the signals are sent parallelly over these orthogonal discrete Fourier coefficients, and then sent back to the over the channel to the receiver. It has been found that this suffers from interference. And when we take discrete Fourier transform and we take the inverse, then what happens, if you remember your signal processing, because in discrete domain, this becomes Z transform, so there is a problem of cyclic prefix. And this is actually the problem in real systems, not mathematical systems, real systems. And this problem needs to be solved. So we do not know what is this cyclic prefix. And hence, to solve this particular problem of intersymbol interference due to cyclic prefix, what we do is we learn this using deep learning network. So as you can see your screens, very easy. We transmit the signal, change it into digital form, do serial to parallel conversion. Why parallel? Because we want to write it on different eigenvectors. So we have parallel symbols. Then we do discrete Fourier transform or then inverse made to write. Then we insert a cyclic prefix, do parallel to serial processing for transmitting it over the channel. And then when we get the signal, then we have already trained the network on simulated data to find out what is the actual interference which has been done in this process. This we learn from the data, known data, training data which has been recorded, and we use this to recover the data in actual transmission. I repeat, I transmit known signals. I know what is the error I'm getting. So this particular data is collected to make a network learn. That if you see my mouse, this is a CNN which is made to learn. The mapping between the input and the output, and this is from simulated data or data collected by sending known signals. And then once this is learned, this knows what is the channel characteristics. This is used to mitigate the problem of channel interference when we recover data. So very easy, I'm doing OFDM, but OFDM is having some problem of intersymbol interference. This intersymbol interference has already been learned because by learning from known data or simulated data, and this then is used. This network which is learned has learned what is the problem, and inverse mapping is learned, and this inverse mapping, what is the input, so what will be the error, this is learned, and this is then used on real data to cancel out the intersymbol interference and get noise and interference free signals. As you can see, again, this is being used, and this is an active area of research. And then, as you can see, the channel distortion, the intersymbol interference, everything is learned in an offline mode by sending known signals. So you know what is the error, because you know the known signal, you get this actual signal output. So you know what is the corruption of the signal. So you know what is the mapping, what is the change when you give a signal. So this function is learned using deep learning, and you know that deep learning is nothing but learning this function. And then this particular function, as you can see in OFDM, a 5-layer deep neural network has been used to learn this particular function, and only a 5-layer DNN is sufficient, and hence this can be used at a later time in actual transmission to study and to know the channel characteristics and cancel out the noise and interference due to channel. So those who are from a little about in wireless sensor networks working at the physical layer, they can see that this can be used, deep learning can be used to mitigate the problems of the channel. And this in sensor networks is very, very important, because the channel interference in forest, the channel interference where the signals are actually being transmitted in sensor or IoT is very, very noisy. And hence this can be used to overcome the signal interference and noise problem in OFDM systems. Then again, can we use again the same problem? So there is a signal interference, and we have, say, a massive MIMO system. Now we are going into somewhere where computer science people may have a problem, but kindly bear with me. It's very easy. We have large number of inputs, large number of outputs. I transmit, and I want to learn what is a multi-input, multi-output system. I want to learn the function. If I'm able to learn the function, what that the channel induces when we have a large number of transmitters and a large number of receivers, then we have learned the MIMO system. And if we have learned the MIMO system, then I've learned what is the interference and what is the noise, and hence I can make the system learn. So I'll skip a few slides, and then what I can do is, when I've learned this, I can really send only a few, a very small amount of data, and instead of sending all data, so I have, again I repeat, what I'm doing is I have a large number of antenna to send. Input antenna is large. Multiple sensors are sensing the field. So instead of sending all the signals, I find what is the correlation between the signals. I learn it using deep learning technique, and hence I am able to learn the best way in which I can send the signal. So I am doing compressed sensing using deep learning. So if you will go through the thesis of Dr. Vishal, you will find that he has used compressed sensing. But here, instead of using a mathematical formula to actually learn compressed sensing, I am using a deep learning network to learn the compressed sensing. What is the minimum amount of data that I should send so that the receiver is able to receive everything? So I am able to do compressed sensing and learn a sparse representation, as you can see, and I can learn a sparse representation, and this sparse representation can then be used to send. And here is the CNN known as refined net, which can be used to learn the compression and reconstruction. So what we have is a 32 by 32 input. As you can see, it's called a refined net because at the input size is small but keeps on increasing. The dimension keeps on increasing. And at the output, we start from a higher dimension. As you can see on the right hand side of your screen, it starts with n cross 1 to 32 by 32, and then its constant size, and we learn an output which is 32 by 32. So input is 32 by 32, and then it becomes larger. And then we have convolutional neural networks, and the activation is used as a sigmoid. We learn the sparse representation of the signal. Once we are able to learn the sparse representation of the signal using this particular CNN or refined net, then we learn what is the data to be sent. I don't need to send all data. Using this particular refined net, only very small amount of signal known as compressed sensed signal can be sent from the network, from the IoT net to the edge network or the base station for learning. We know that transmitting or transmission is the costliest thing in IoT. So we want to conserve energy. So we send very small amount of signals, or we do compressed sensing, and we don't need to compress, we learn only very small amount of signal. We just take very small amount of signal, learn the channel characteristics and send it. So what is happening, I am not only able to do compression, but I am able to do compressed sensing and conserve energy by finding out the sparse representation of the IoT data. And this is where refined net can be used inside the IoT network, working at basis, working at the cluster heads, or working at strong anchor nodes, or working at those IoT devices which have sufficient power and sufficient resources to send only sparse representation or to do compressed sensing. And as you can see, this particular technique of using refined net outperforms traditional compressed sensing techniques, which is, as you know, is quite random. Then, till now, friends, we were talking only about deep learning, but can we learn? Can we learn from experience? Since the channel characteristics keeps on changing, it's dynamic in nature, can we plan to send what needs to be sent? And can deep reinforcement learning can be used? So we plan and we use a deep neural network to do reinforcement learning. What is reinforcement learning? We learn from experience, and then plan as to what is to be sent. So we learn by when something known is sent, then we know what is sent and what is the change. So we know what is the channel characteristics. Again, something is sent, again, there is some change in the channel characteristics. So the reinforcement learning keeps on tracking what is being changed and learns what will be the next change or dynamic nature of the channel. And this, my friends, is learning from experience, and it's known as reinforcement learning. And this can be used for link adaptation. I can give a feedback as to this is the change in the channel characteristics. So this should be the change in the signal to be transmitted, and hence what is to be sent, so that I can get error-free signal. And again, my friends, I don't want you to learn and I don't want you to teach reinforcement learning, but deep reinforcement learning, which is nothing but a deep neural network or a deep CNN, we can learn the planning. How do we plan? What is to be sent in future? Because what will be the change in the channel characteristics in future? So what should be the change in future, so that I get error-free signal, is what we are actually doing. So let me just read this. Use reinforcement learning to learn dynamic behavior of the channel, how it changes. The deep Q network, which is nothing but a deep reinforcement learning technique, at the receiver side takes a few known signal, predicts what will be the change or what will be the channel characteristics after a few time periods. This can be used and given as a feedback to the transmitter to adapt to the future changes in the channel. And this is something that we had published. This is our paper. I'll not give into details because this will become too involved. But what I'm trying to say is that we can use deep reinforcement learning and to plan, and deep reinforcement learning is able to find out what is the change and predict what is the change, and then learn a policy of change. And this policy as to what should be our policy in the wake or in the changing dynamic characteristics of the channel, and hence this can be used to learn the channel characteristics and predict how the channel is going to behave in future, so that we are in a position to change the input signal, so that tomorrow when the signal is to be sent, adapts itself to the changing noise characteristics. It's a little tough to understand, but as you can see, the deep neural network that we use is able to adapt the actual change and the predicted change it's able to follow, except at few points it is not able to follow, which says that still more research is needed in this particular area, so that we are in a position to actually learn the dynamic characteristics of the channel. Then, my friends, deep learning has been used to find out what is the modulation format which is being sent. Why it is being required? Because if you do not know what is the modulation format, especially in wartime situation, the modulation format is people keep on changing to evade the enemy. So your receiver must be in a position to know what is the modulation format, so that you are able to receive the signal. And AlexNet has been used to classify the constellation diagram. And what is AlexNet? We know that AlexNet is a CNN-based deep learning system. We have thousands of neurons and millions of connections, and it has thousands of classes, and it has been found that it can differentiate between QPSK, 8PSK, 16 QAM, and 64 QAM signals. And it outperforms, in some cases, it has an accuracy which is similar to that of SVM. But still, we have a lot, as you can see, when we have a lot of different types of modulation techniques or formats, this is an area of research which can be done by you. Then, suppose the traffic is changing. And what kind of traffic? The network traffic is changing in your network or wireless. Can we predict what will be the traffic? Can we have a software-defined radio? If I'm able to predict what will be the traffic, then I can use the empty parts of the spectrum. If I'm able to predict, then I can have efficient source allocation also. So in cellular network, that means our own mobile network, if I know what will be the frequency band which is going to be free, then I can use that frequency band to transmit, thereby having lesser and lesser interference. Or use software-defined radio, or have cognitive radio. So in cognitive radio, we do require prediction of the traffic. Then an autoencoder model with LSTM, because we need to have LSTM because the data is varying with time and we need to predict in time. So this is, as you can see in the figure, we have autoencoders which say that you have to learn the data, what kind of data is coming, and then from different cells, as you can see, these are the all red ones are a cell and which is surrounded by other cells in the cellular network. And there are inputs to LSTM with autoencoders, stacked autoencoders, which are able to learn the characteristics of the cellular network, and then we can use LSTMs for predicting what will be the traffic in each cellular or each cell after some time, and this can be used to efficiently utilize the spectrum or the channel, do resource allocation, etc. Friends, this is again a very, very young system, and people are just young, very, very new area of research, and you can really work in this particular area of traffic prediction. So if you look at this, so the historical data of the cell is available, both the cell under consideration and its neighboring cells. Each cell is represented by an autoencoder, a stacked autoencoder, and there is a local stacked autoencoder, there is a global stacked autoencoder for global representation. Both of them then can be used, and input can be used, sent to an LSTM, which can learn and predict what will be the traffic in different cells. And this is giving very encouraging results when in our own labs. So for a very large LTE network, for a 5G network with 2,844 base stations, for a very large area, we find that people were able to predict the traffic very, very accurately. And this allows us to really use the resources which are very limited. You cannot really make wireless channel. What is given. So efficient utilization of the resources can be done, and it has been found that this works better than support vector regression or any other time series prediction technique. So what are the future research trends, my friends? So we can say that at the physical layer, there can be jamming. People can jam. Can we learn what is a jamming signal so that we can do anti-jamming? So deep reinforcement learning, that is deep learning with reinforcement learning, can be used to learn the jamming characteristics or characteristics of the jamming signal, and we can then undo the effect of jamming signal. We do not know what is the error and what kind of error correction techniques is required. So we can learn this again using a deep learning model. We can do interference alignment so that there is no interference. We can classify modulation techniques. We can detect signals. So this we can do at the physical layer. At the data link layer or the MAC layer, we can do traffic prediction so that we can allocate bandwidth. We can reduce contention, channel contention. We can allocate bandwidth using the access point of a wireless. So an access point of an 802.11 Wi-Fi can predict what is going to be the traffic in its area and start allocating bandwidth accordingly. At the routing layer, again, the switch can find out where is the congestion. How can we overcome congestion? What routes are to be used? If I have multiple routes, how to do load balancing on that particular route so that tomorrow I can have congestion-free traffic. So in all different areas, not only in this area, even for congestion control at the transport layer, we can mimic queuing analysis using deep learning, and we can analyze the queue characteristics using deep learning for better congestion control and management. Then, not only this, we can actually do cross-layer design. We know that we don't violate layering principles, but if you want to have better characteristics, if you want to have better channel quality, better beam orientation, how to take care of node mobility, then in that case we can go in for cross-layer design to improve the quality of transmission, to have better and lesser delay, better low loss. We can have better resource allocation. So my friends, not only at the physical layer, but at the transport layer, at the data link layer, at the MAC layer, at the network layer, and as we have seen in the previous part of the talk, at the application layer of IoT, deep learning finds applications. And deep learning can be used not only on the IoT device by pruning or by doing approximation, it can be implemented on the edge, and we can do edge-based computing or edge computing for in-network inference or for actuator networks. So learning, and especially deep learning with reinforcement learning finds applications. However, as of today, it's very difficult. Hardly any research is there and we need to do a lot of research in all areas. Every area is an open area where deep learning is required in IoT, from the sensing layer to the physical layer, to the data link layer, to the MAC layer, to routing, to applications, to edge computing, to security and privacy of data, and even privacy-based, privacy-preserving machine learning and deep learning requires a lot of research. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you so
Vishal.
much. Thank you so much, sir. As always, sir, the entire session was quite a learning experience, and I myself have noted few of the things which my research scholars would be witnessing in the upcoming interactions which I have with them. And now I think the forum is open for questions. So sorry I said questions, but rather queries, I would say. So I request the participants to please, if you wish to ask any doubt or any query, if you have, please do. Okay, so okay, Sanidhya Singh has raised your raised hand. Please unmute your mic and you can ask the question to the professor.
Hello, Professor. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure hearing to your sessions, and I just have a normal query, like coming from a novice in the field. I just want to know that the encoders, the topic you told about, and the channel part that is included in it. I was just wondering that there are many times that the information that are passed from one end often gets, lost due to the channel that is involved in the middle, like there is a storm or something like that. So that was the part that I'll want to go over again. So you can point me some of the directions in which I should look for my future references.
See, if the signal is lost, then if you know the channel characteristics, then you can design an error correction coding to actually find out whether the signal is lost or not. So as of today, what we do is a hybrid error correction technique, in which we say that we have an error detection and correction coding. We detect error or loss of signal, correct as much as we can, and whatever cannot be corrected, we request for retransmission. So this is traditionally used, and in modern versions of any transmitter, we do error detection, do correction as much as we can do, and ask for retransmission if we are not able to correct errors. So yes, we can have better error correction, detection and correction algorithms, but most of the time machine learning has less role to play here, because we send only that signal which we do not know. Anything that can be created or reconstructed at the output, most of the time is not sent, because we want to send minimum amount of signal. So signal is without redundancy. So we compress the signal when we send. So the possibility of reconstruction of a lost part, if the part is lost by an error, burst or something, is very, very difficult. And obviously it has to be resent only. And if it's a real-time transmission, then obviously we just simply drop it. Over.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. I hope the doubt is
If he
clear.
has a counter this thing and he is not satisfied, he can ask.
Okay. So, okay,
No.
Sir, one more question. Nandini Patil, please unmute your mic and ask your query.
Hello.
Hello.
So session was very beautiful, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, nice to attend that seminar, your presentation, sir. So my query is, if we can use the direct data, sir, for fire detection, we will be knowing that this is the temperature and this is the humidity, this is the some prefix. In that only the fire will be detected. Then why to use this this ANN, sir?
See, as I told you, the fire can be the most important thing in fire detection is that we need to detect, and not only detect but detect for sure. So if you have fire and your system is giving a lot of say false positives, then that means there is no fire, and you are saying that their system says that there is fire, then in that case you will be sending a team all the time, which will be very, very costly. Suppose you have a fire station and all the time people twice every day आपने कहा कि भेड़िया आया and there is no भेड़िया, then people will get lakhs. So we don't want any false positives. So we want not only to increase the accuracy but reduce false positives. And hence you want a system which is able to predict with minimum false positives, and hence we use deep learning network. Number one. Number two, we want to, as I told you, if there is a lot of light and lot of temperature, and that is a summer time in North India, then it's not a fire, it's actually summer. So, but if it's night and there is a lot of light and there's a lot of heat, then heat is normal, but light indicates that something untoward has happened. So incorporating the contextual information is really required. So because of these two reasons, number one, we don't want false positives, because false positives will make the reaction team very, very lethargic. After going 100 times, they find there's no fire, so they'll not go when there's actual fire. And number two, because the deep learning allows you to learn from data, so you can learn, you can have different kinds of output at different times of weather, different times of the day and night, different weather conditions, different environmental conditions, and hence deep learning network or any deep learning technique can be very, very useful, and you can adapt it to a specific geography and environment or forest conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. If anyone has any questions, then please do ask. Okay, I think no one has raised hand yet. So, sir, I think that will be all for today. And thank you so much, sir, for giving this wonderful session. And we hope to invite you in future workshops and conferences as well, sir. Thank you so much.
Vishal. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity.